Welcome to Bad Dog Agility, a podcast helping you reach all of your dog agility goals. Whether it's competing under the bright lights of the televised finals at Westminster or successfully navigating a homemade course in your own backyard, we'll bring you training tips, interviews, and news about the great sport of dog agility. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
I'm ready.
I'm ready.
The show starts with your hosts, Jennifer, Esteban, and Sarah.
I'm Jennifer.
I'm Esteban.
And I'm Sarah, and this is episode 358. Today's podcast is brought to you by St. Rocco's Treats.
It's Grace from Hounds of Heck.
It's Amber from American Canine Country.
It's Cynthia from CH Dog Agility.
It's Lindsay from Y2 Canines. And we love using St. Rocco's Treats as our high
Value reward.
And you will too. Visit us at stroccostreats.shop and use the code BD30 for 30% off your first order. Enjoy the attention-grabbing flavor and easy-to-break texture that Grace, Amber, Cynthia, Lindsay, and so many others love about St. Rocco's Treats. Again, use the code BD30 for 30% off. Thank you.
And you can find a link to St. Rocco's Treats on the show notes page. Today, we're going to be talking about the Masters Agility Championship at Westminster. This event happened just this past Saturday. We have on the podcast, of course, Jennifer, who's always on the podcast with us, but was at the event competing with multiple dogs, and with her son, who was competing with a dog. We talked about that in our last Wednesday wrap-up. And we are also joined by the overall winner, Emily Klarman with Vanish. Welcome to the podcast, Emily.
Hello, nice to be here.
I should say welcome back. We've had Emily on before when she won the National Agility Championship. So here she is just, bringing in the wins. But let's start, Emily, just tell us a little bit about your dog Vanish, but also about kind of your general history in the sport, how long you've been doing it, just kind of a little intro to you for people who do not know who you are.
Sure. My name is Emily. I run a 8-year-old border collie named Vanish. I started agility in 2005. I was about 10 years old, so I started in the sport as a junior handler. When I was a kid, we didn't quite have all the fun little junior programs that they do now, but I had a really supportive group of adults that kind of groomed me into where I am now. I grew up in the Midwest, and about a couple of years ago, I moved to the East Coast to work at UDog for Jessica Aju and Perry DeWitt. And right about that time, Vanish and I really started competing more on a high scale, and just kind of have been full throttle since then. And it's been a wild journey so far with her.
That's amazing. One thing that I think is really exciting about your win this year is that you run in the 16-inch class. And I remember when Westminster first kind of announced that they were going to do this overall champion thing, and it was going to be based on yards per second rather than time. Mm-hmm. So we kind of pointed out as agility people that doesn't really make too much sense. There's, every you can't really compare height to height. There's no real fair way to do it. But we pointed out that the larger dogs have more yardage. And so therefore you have to have an even faster time as a 16-inch dog. But here we are, 10 years later, 11 years later, we're at our 11th Masters Agility Champion. And while I still fundamentally believe that it is, not quite the right way to do an overall champion, we have had a 12-inch winner last year, and we've had multiple 16-inch winners. Jen, you yourself have been the overall winner in the 16-inch class. And so I guess it's just kind of cool to be here later and to have yet another 16-inch class winner take the overall championship. But I did want to point that out that this particular year, you did have the fastest time, of any dog. So, there are some years where the fastest dog doesn't get the overall winner because of the way that the yardage works out. But in this case, the fastest dog was also the fastest dog by yards per second. So congratulations on that piece of it.
Thank you.
And is that like in your mind as a 16-inch handler, is that in your mind a little bit, or do you just, you don't really have any control over it and you run, and then you just kind of see what happens?
Yeah, ultimately, like it's out of our control with who we're competing against. I knew this year and historically in previous years the 20-inch dogs tend to get a little bit more of the advantage, and I don't have too much knowledge about the yardage for the 24-inch group, but I know historically the 20-inch dogs tend to have the advantage just because they get to have more yardage. So the 16 and below have to work pretty hard to get up there for it. But I think Jen would be last year or the year before. Was that the first time we had a non 20-inch dog, or have you done it more than once with a 16-inch dog?
The year that Pink won was the first time it was a 16-inch dog. So that would have been in 2020. So in 2020, Pink won out of the 16-inch class, and that was the first time. And then B won again in 2022 as one of the first, not the first, but one of the few non-border collies. I think of the 11 years, they said that 9 of the years has been border collies. So I think B and then the one Australian Shepherd are the only ones that are non-border collies. And so, yeah, last year, as Sarah mentioned, we had the 12-inch. So we're getting some diversity in jump heights and breeds, which I think is nice to see as well.
Yeah, definitely.
Absolutely. So one thing that was also interesting about this year, and they highlighted in the broadcast, was the move back to Manhattan. So like I think of Westminster because, we went for many years in a row, and it was always at the Pier 94 in the middle of Manhattan. And kind of, to me, that's what Westminster is. But in especially recent years, it's moved around to several different venues. And then this was kind of the move back. So Jen, having been at a lot of those different places, this is the first time at this particular facility, even though it was back in Manhattan, it was at a facility that we hadn't been at before. So I guess, what were your thoughts? I have my own thoughts from watching the broadcast, but what were your thoughts on the venue?
This year definitely took it as close to I've seen as the vibe and the feel that we had at the Piers since leaving the Pier. I believe 2020 was the last time it was at the Pier. COVID hit, and so they had to move things around. They took it outside. Then the Pier was under construction. So it was at Arthur Ashe the last couple of years. They finally moved it back, and a lot of the same feelings, a lot of the same experiences came back. If you had not ever been to the Pier, I think this year may have seemed sort of chaotic. As a person who had been at the Pier, I'm like, oh, right. Okay. Westminster's back. This is what it's like. Like you can't watch the rings. You can't get to the rings. I mean, you literally could not leave the rings in the preliminary rounds. Like the crowd came in so close to the edge, and it wasn't segregated that like you got stuck in the ring and you had to like push people out of the way to leave the ring. You had the issue of struggles with parking and getting all your stuff schlepped inside. Like all the things that make it hard and miserable are also the things that make it what we know as Westminster. So I'm glad that I have the experiences at the Pier to prep myself for this. I mean, even just today in class, people were talking about how like, oh my gosh, people were like draping over the edge and kids were leaning over. And I'm like, yep, that's Westminster. I mean, that's what we're used to. But with it being at the Javits Center, and then it wasn't the castle. I want to say the castle, but that outdoor,
the Billie Jean Center.
Yeah, there was that, the Billie Jean Center the last 2 years, but what was it?
Lyndhurst Mansion?
Yes.
Yeah.
Like those were just so different because you didn't get the spectators, right? Like those 4 years. So they did 2 years at each location were great for the competitors. I mean, frankly, they were as an exhibitor way more user friendly. Those 4 years for sure. But they did take away what I think of as kind of traditional Westminster. But again, I think you had a lot of people attend this year that had never been when it was at the Pier. Emily, I don't know if you ever attended when it was at the Pier.
No, my first year.
Yeah. So it was definitely a different vibe. So far less user friendly for sure from an exhibitor standpoint, but very exciting, thrilling, crowds cheering, screaming, very much what I originally think of as Westminster.
Yeah, I love that. I love the crowds. I ran a dog who really fed off that energy at Westminster, and those are the memories that stick with me. So I never competed at any of the new venues, right? I think we went maybe 2-3 times. in the old venue, but I think the crowds make all the difference, and you can really see it even in the televised broadcast, which was live this year, and the first time they had done that in a long
quite a
time.
few years, yeah,
many years. So I think that's cool, and I definitely want to hear from Emily if that impacted you in any way. Do you feel like you were a little bit more excited or more nervous, or was there a demand to be more flexible on the part of the exhibitors? Were you guys warned ahead of time?
Yeah, I could sense a little bit more, I don't want to say disorganization from Westminster, but you could tell they were definitely a little bit more on edge about being more prompt, and they were definitely seemed a little bit more stressed out than when it was broadcasted the day later. But as far as like my performance, I think it's such a cool opportunity to see the sport of agility grow, and the fact that Fox thought it was interesting enough to have it be live. I think it's cool to see the sport start to grow and see it televised more, and to get more people into the sport to have fun with their dogs and compete at this level. So surprisingly, it didn't really bother me. I always think of it as like a cool opportunity to promote the sport and grow it forward.
Well, we're talking about the change in venues. Something that really jumped out at me on the broadcast were the enormous posts right in the middle of the course. And there wasn't just one of them, there were two of them. And it even affected, I think, some of the camera work. I felt like it would have impacted how I handled maybe some of those courses. And at least in the broadcast, they mentioned that at least one of the rings had been run there previously. So did you all have some exposure to that? Was the finals the first time you were seeing these posts? Tell me a little bit about that. Let me start with Emily.
The finals course, the posts were no problems, even with how ginormous they were. That particular flow of the course, it didn't really interfere or have the dog between the handler. So it wasn't really a problem. However, in the preliminary rounds, in both the standard course and the jumpers course, there was quite a few mistakes because of the poles being involved that I noticed. So I definitely had to take that into account when I chose my handling path. Because I thought this year the courses, the flow of them, the challenges of them, they were very friendly. I really enjoyed them a lot. They were really good courses. I never like to say it out loud. I'm like, these are not too complicated. They should be able to get through. However, probably arguably the hardest part of the course on both of them were really those posts, particularly jumpers. There was a pole in the opening. I think it was obstacle number 3. And it was just kind of like I don't want to say it was a simple layer, but the pole had to have been 8 feet in circumference. And a surprising amount of experienced dogs were going around that pole. And then the second pole throughout that course had the handler either encroaching on their line to a backside if they chose not to layer it, or they were going to have to layer the pole and go into a backside with a little bit of disconnection. So that gave a couple of the teams trouble. And it was something I know I definitely had to account for when strategizing and preparing for both of the preliminary rounds.
Yeah, when I looked at the maps and when I looked at the videos, I mean, like you said, these were probably 8 foot across poles. So we're not talking about the like 2 foot poles that we see in a lot of different venues, you know, that people may be familiar with, that people kind of have to work around. It's just the nature of the construction. But, you know, I know, Jen, where you normally train, that there are poles, but they are not 8 foot poles. They are like 2 foot poles. And, you know, with those 2 foot poles, you just put the wing next to it and it's all going to be fine. But these 8 foot poles were huge, and you couldn't see, you know, you completely lose visual track of the dog, and the dog loses visual track of the handler. I watched your, so first I noted on the map that they look just like the ones that we normally see, like the ones at Jen's building. It's like a tiny little circle on the map that says column, not like a huge, like, you know, 8 foot thing that would have taken up almost an entire grid on a map. So I thought that was kind of funny. I was like, that is not quite accurate, Mr. Map. And then the other thing that I noticed as I was watching Jen's videos, I asked her to send me hers because, you know, so that you can't see everything on the broadcast and stuff like that. And I noticed, I think it was the jumpers, Jen, where it was at post number 3. And it's like, you let out, like, and you were just like standing right next to the post. And then you just disappeared. You just like ducked behind the post as soon as you'd kind of released your dog and they started down that line. And I did feel, and tell me if I'm right, that when in the video, it looked like you had to kind of catch B just a little bit coming back through a piece of the course where maybe I couldn't see the dog at all, but you kind of took like this extra step in, like she had started to zig when you wanted to zag or something like that. Did I catch that right?
Well, the jumpers course, as Emily said, was, in my opinion, like a very big problem with the poles. 2 of my 4 dogs. So like I had a 50% failure rate on jump number 3. Because of the pole. Like both the dogs that faulted on jump number 3 would not have faulted there if it had not been for the pole. So the jumper's ring definitely was a problem. I did not want to layer that early on in the course and have the disconnect going over to 4 or 5. I think if I had more momentum, I would have been okay. So the whole lead out was I wanted to lead out far enough through the gap that I wasn't then pushing forward to cause my dog to go like around 3 or around 4. And thank goodness they stay, and I was able to do lead outs. But then, like, yes, as you said, you have to like kind of duck behind the wing. And that's what then faulted Sting is like, I stepped behind the wing and he went, "Where'd you go?" And he like pulled in around the wing and missed the jump because I like disappeared. And then the second spot on that jump, the layer on the backside, jump backside, I ended up layering with 3 of the 4 there. Because if you didn't layer and you went around the pole, then a lot of dogs were pushing off course to the broad jump. I know in standard with B, I don't know if you're talking standard or jumper.
I think that was probably it.
It was in standard that I had a little glitch with the pole. Yes, it was a good save on her part. Well, our part, I don't know, but it was an issue that was there because of the pole. So I did feel like in jumpers, the poles were far more of a problem than in standard. And then, as Emily said, they really weren't a factor at all in the finals. My theory on that is just that Michelle, who did the standard and I suspect did the finals, I don't know this for a fact, this is 100% my theory, is she's our US judge. And so she's probably very used to working with poles. The jumpers judge is our foreign judge. And I suspect that they don't run with poles. Like I've never really seen videos of international competitions in any facility with poles. I don't know if it's legal or not. And so I'm guessing he maybe didn't have as much experience with that. I also questioned, and I did mention this to the administration because they came up and asked me my opinion on some things with the new facility, is that I wasn't sure if the columns were accurately described to the judges. If they gave the judges course maps similar to
the way they gave ours,
us, that was a huge problem. Like they needed to indicate these are massive columns, work around them. I know there was some tweaking because I believe in jumpers on the map, the jump was supposed to touch the pole. And then Paul ended up shifting it away, which I think arguably made it harder. But I think that was one of the things that I commented for next year is like, just make sure these judges like have watched videos of this year and that you accurately depict exactly the size of those poles. Because like at our facility, and I think Emily, UDOG has poles too, but like we'll often put a tunnel around them, like just do a U-shaped tunnel around the pole. There was no way that was going to happen. Like a 20-foot tunnel was not going to wrap all the way around these poles. They were so big. So there were definitely in the preliminary rounds, decisions that were made on my handling based on the columns and the pole location and size.
Yeah.
Do we already know where Westminster will be next year?
I was under the interpretation that they did a 2-year contract with the Javits Center. I have not seen that in print anywhere. Okay. I don't know why I think that. Maybe I
okay, right.
Maybe it's just speculation that over the last 2 years they did, 2 years at Lyndhurst and 2 years at Arthur Ashe, and so in my head it's 2 years. But I don't have any like official information on that. Right. I'm just kind of assuming it'll be back there.
Okay, so if I take a straw poll of 2 overall champions, what are your votes for? Do we want to see at least the finals in this same area with the polls next year? Yes or no?
I'm neutral. I could care less. I'm fine with it. I was fine with everything this year. I was fine with it. So I'm okay with it. But if they want to move it, that's fine too. I don't care.
That's fine too. Okay, Emily, what do you think?
In the preliminaries, as far as the polls, if they can make adjustments like they did in finals, where it's not quite in the way where literally the main focus of our handling choices is based around the poll, which is a bit untraditional for when we're thinking about horse handling strategies. However, more than the poles, what I would say would be nice to maybe move it to, if we ever had the opportunity to go to the gardens. But what I noticed was hard, and maybe Jen has more experience with this and you with being at the piers. But for finals, once we moved to one ring, it was really hard for competitors and spectators to watch the other dogs run. So like I had a flew in from Chicago to come watch the show with me. She didn't enter a dog, and like we were like standing on bar stools and that sort of thing to kind of be able to see the show. And I heard some spectators who bought tickets that couldn't see, and they felt disappointed in that way. So just for more watching purposes, I would like for there at least to, if it's going to be kept at the same place, like make some seating accommodations where the bleachers can be a little bit taller so people can see, or put in a facility that can keep up with the demand that the audience needs to view it correctly would be my preference on that.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And I was going to ask the question of Jen because I don't think there was enough viewing space at the pier, but just from the video, it looked like the pier had more seating space than this one
and
did.
that went up higher.
Because it went higher.
Yeah, I was just going to say the viewing at the pier was 3-sided as opposed to 4. So that was a factor, but the seating went higher.
Right.
So I definitely feel like the seating was a little bit better, a little bit less chaotic at the pier. You still had people struggling, but it wasn't as bad. It was, as Emma said, it was pretty chaotic. I mean, it was very bad for the ticket holders who spent $100 and couldn't see, but like it was getting unsafe. Like the people standing on bar stools and standing on chairs. I'm like, one person topples down and you have all these people going out. And it made it hard for the exhibitor. I mean, we couldn't see. We were sitting in the crating area watching it on the Fox app because we couldn't see anything, and you couldn't get to the ring. So it definitely would benefit them to try to have more seating. I mean, that was one thing that was really great about last year. Is last year you're in a stadium. I mean, you're truly in a stadium. Seating was indefinite, but because of the location, you really didn't get that many spectators. Most of the people that were at Arthur Ashe were friends of exhibitors. You didn't get the people in off the street. So I know that's a big part of it. Ticket sales went way up this year. And they tried to accommodate and do some things for the people who got tickets and came in, especially during the preliminary rounds. But yes, I would agree. They need to do something for the finals. And if that means sell less tickets, which I know is not the direction they want to go, but it was a very, very hard and unsafe for viewing.
I feel like if Confirmation can fill the garden, I think that we could too. It might take a couple of years for people to kind of know that it's happening and everything, but a Saturday night, in the middle of New York, like I think agility could do it if you gave it a chance. I really do.
Yeah, I totally agree.
I would love to see that happen one day.
Yeah.
Yeah,
absolutely.
So. Okay, let me ask next about the surface. And I asked that because I thought I saw some dogs slipping. I know, Jen, you had a dog slip right before the weave poles. What did you guys think about the surface? Let's start here with Jen.
I think the surface situation this year was very similar to last year.
Do you think it's the same thing they rolled out? Like
it's not the same
carpet?
No, it's not the exact same carpet, but it's the same company.
Okay.
But I think it was a similar situation where there was a lot of talk, a lot of people talking about surface. I would say there were way more people talking about surface than there were the columns in terms of like the crating and the exhibitors. And it really was just like how your dog handles it. My dogs did not struggle with the surface last year, and I really didn't feel like they struggled with the surface this year. I did spray their feet with water before the runs, except in finals, hence the little bit of a slip going into the weave poles. But I will also say that my dogs do not traditionally slip. I think there's dogs that slip. It doesn't matter what surface it is. They're going to slip here. They're going to slip there. It's the rubber pelleted, it's the carpet, it's long fibers, it's short fibers. I'm lucky that I don't have a major slipping dog. So I did do some precautions in terms of, I do lots of toe stuff and toe strengthening. I teach my dogs how to round their foot. I teach my dogs how to dig in and grip. I don't teach them to run with a flat foot and slide on their pads. I teach them to dig in. I leave their nails long. I sprayed their feet with water. I was okay with the surface, but I think I'm in the minority on that one. So I totally respect those who did have falls and slips and would question whether or not they want to come back. I saw it. I saw handler sliding. But for me personally, my dogs didn't have a huge issue. The surface was very soft. Like with the surface at my facility is a shorter grass blade. but it's more like a Brillo pad. Like it will scuff you up. Like you will get a rug burn if you fall. This was very, very, very plush. Like you wanted to sit down and roll around in it, and it was comfortable to kneel on. Like I would go sit and wait for my runs on the turf. It was so soft. It was like sitting on a cloud. But I think the softness is what then, if the dogs run kind of on their pad and flat footed, they just then slid right across, versus if it was cushy and they kind of would dig in with their nails, it was a little bit better. But I know the surface is an issue. I just think that there is some relationship with the company that does the surf in Westminster. And I'm not sure that's something that we're going to see change, because I do think they're sponsoring the turf. So I'm not sure that's going to be something we change, and certainly a factor for people going forward.
Yeah. Emily, what do you think?
I have similar thoughts to Jen on this. I know other people who had dogs that had a harder time adjusting to it. And I was there last year that when we ran on the same surface, and I would say I saw about the same amount of dog slipping. It might have been a hair better, because if I recall on last year, the jumpers ring was kind of over like a plastic surface. So there was more like more rivets in the jumpers ring from the surface they put it on. I think not being quite as grippy to give to the dogs running over it. So I think it might have been a hair better, but ultimately the surface was about the same. I suspect the reason that they picked this surface, and this is kind of just a suspicion, kind of going off what Jen said, because we have similar surface as Jen does at UDog, where it's much more abrasive. It's meant to be sticky. It's meant to be tacky, so that way they don't slip and they can grip and that sort of thing. But this surface, like Jen said, was much more plush, much more soft, and not impossible to run over. I'm glad that Vanish is the type of dog where she's going to be careful with her body. And I think that gives us an advantage in a lot of cases. But I suspect why they picked the more plush surface is for the confirmation dogs that are going to be showing throughout the weekend. So like the next day, they're going to be having people kneeling down and stacking their dogs and that sort of thing. So they're going to have their knees on top of that. And like Jen said, it's really abrasive, the surfaces that we have here that have become popular in agility. And I think in confirmation, that's going to scuff their knees. They're going to have little spots on it. It's not going to be comfortable.
It's going to put a run in their pantyhose.
I know, right?
So I think Westminster's trying to balance, the whole event, not just the agility. They're trying to think about all the things that they're going to be having going on throughout the week. And I think that was just something that they did their best on with what they had.
Yeah. One more question that I had on in terms of like how things, I guess the reality of things is, I know that there was quite a bit of discussion before the event about people being concerned about flyball and the noise of flyball and it being nearby. Did that end up being anything at all? Or was it like not even noticeable? Were they like on the opposite end? Like how did that turn out?
It ended up on my end being completely fine. I barely heard them at all. I think there was so much noise with the amount of people that were there, and they were playing music in the background and all that sort of thing, that it kind of got drowned out in the big event and that sort of thing. So I didn't find flyball a problem at all. It was more of the columns that I think gave people an unexpected issue.
I would agree with that. The way the convention center was set up for Westminster, there was like 3 giant corridors with small openings to get from like one area to the other. And one area was all the vendors and food. One area was the 2 agility rings. And then the other area was like the crating, the obedience, and the flyball and the demos. So when you were over in like the middle corridor where the agility rings are, you would have no idea flyball was going on. Like the noise wasn't an issue. They had music going. There were people, there were crowds, like you had no idea. During the races, like it was maybe a little bit elevated in the crating areas, but never to the point that it affected anything that I did or anything that my dogs did. So I think the entire event is going to be a busy, loud convention center type atmosphere in the crating. I wouldn't say that the flyball contributed or added to any element in a negative way.
Yeah. All right, Emily, I want to hear from you about what happened after you got the overall winner. So the overall winner always is asked to stay in New York for a couple of days and then be a part of like the big awards ceremony. So what were you wearing? How did you dress? What was it like? Like, give us the scoop on that whole event. Cause that's kind of like, that's one of those truly like once in a lifetime experiences that is associated with Westminster.
Yeah, definitely. I've been lucky to do a lot of different things with Vanish, a lot of great opportunities, but this one was certainly unique and special in that regard. So we don't live too far away from New York City. We're about like an hour and a half away. So I very easily could have gone home. However, I decided to stay in New York for the day, and we did some touristing, and I had a friend come up. Jess and Perry helped make sure that they gave me some dresses, and I had some wardrobe choices. So I had a friend come up and bring me a slew of outfits to pick from. So I was able to just stay downtown and have somebody bring me some things. So that was nice to have some friends come up and support us and get dressed up and be under the lights. It was definitely a very unique experience. So I'm really glad that we were able to have that.
Excellent. You have some pictures?
For sure. I'll send them over.
Excellent.
I have a question about media coverage. So what was the media experience like for you compared to, say, winning nationals?
Definitely a lot. And I feel like this year I stumbled a little bit more on my words than I have been in previous years being interviewed. I'm not sure why, but so there was the initial interview from after our run, and then after our overall, we got to come back on, was it Monday? What day is today? Today Tuesday?
Yep.
We just got back this morning, actually. So you guys have me in a little bit of a foggy head, but we had our local news station reach out to us that from our hometown in Rockford. So I get to talk with them tomorrow, and I think like the New York Times interviewed us and all that sort of stuff. So definitely a bit intimidating there, but we took it all in.
That is awesome. I was asking because I'm always tracking how dog agility is doing as a sport in public perception, and who's following, and what does social media look like, and what are the network ratings. At least publicly, the television ratings are not yet out. And then, of course, now there's a lot of streaming, so it's a little harder to know exactly what's going on, right? So was the most recent Super Bowl that we just had this Sunday, by the way, the day after Westminster. So I thought the timing of that, especially because Fox was also doing the Super Bowl this year. So I thought that was interesting.
That's why Westminster was live this year.
That's why?
Yeah, because usually they edit it and put it out Sunday, but Sunday was the Super Bowl. So they had to do it live to get it out Saturday.
Gotcha. Yeah, so it'll be interesting, to see what the ratings are like. So I don't know if the numbers are actually depressed or if they're inflated as far as the Super Bowl. So we'll see what happens with agility. But I felt like, at least compared to the very early years of Westminster, where social media was really a big driver of interest, and then I think of audience, starting from the hundreds of thousands of viewers to over 1 million. I feel like it's less so. Twitter is not what it used to be, right? And that people used to live tweet a lot of different sporting events, like the Super Bowl, like the finals, like the Olympics, and things like that. And I think that's much less so. Twitter's, become a different thing. Instagram is much more popular today, right? Facebook. That's where a large portion of, at least, I think the dog agility community kind of resides there on Facebook. I can't speak to other sports, but I think a large chunk of people are active on Facebook. What about TikTok? Emily, are you on TikTok? And have either of you, well, I'll start with Emily, checked out TikTok? Do they have clips from Westminster, or is your TikTok inbox blowing up? I don't even know. We have a TikTok and I've never used it. I think we've posted one thing on it.
I have a lot of different forms of social media, and I feel like I have been good about staying off of TikTok just because like the rabbit hole that it can go down, and through like Instagram Reels and Facebook Reels or whatever, I already get sucked into those. So for my own time off my phone, I have stayed off TikTok, but people send me TikToks all the time. And the nice thing about that app is it's a little bit easier to do like a search for it. So I'm sure some stuff has come up on TikTok, and I've watched a couple of them, but I don't have my own TikTok or anything like that, which maybe I should, but I feel like there's enough things on that Facebook and Instagram and all that sort of stuff is enough.
We're so healthy on this podcast.
I mean, maybe. Jennifer.
I don't do much on TikTok. It was like my COVID thing. I think TikTok grew during COVID. And since then I have an account. I couldn't tell you the last time I was on it or used it. I do Facebook and Instagram, and I use them for two very different things. So there's very little crossover. Occasionally there'll be the same content on both, but I tend to let Facebook be more work related. And within Facebook, I have two Facebook accounts, one for social and one for work. And then Instagram is more of what I do for the non-dog community. So I do a lot more stuff for just general public and people that aren't dog people or people that are just admiring dog agility from afar in different countries. So I have a relatively large reach across the two platforms, but I use them for very different things. So yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I'm kind of caught on that. Like Facebook is what I'm comfortable with. But I don't feel like that's the younger, everybody says Facebook's for old people. So I'm trying to be better about Instagram. But again, I use it for a very different purpose. I don't use it for work and I don't use it for like the dog community. So it's kind of a very different thing, but I do think the media stuff, as a person who's kind of either like won my height at Westminster, but not overall, won my height and won overall, and then done absolutely nothing at Westminster and kind of coming across definitely the years of winning the overall, there was so much more media. And I'm warning you, Emily, it goes for a while. Like it'll go, you'll get people reach out to you in like 7 days, 14 days, 21 days. And there's definitely some cool opportunities. I think one of my coolest opportunities that I had after winning the overall was getting to throw the first pitch at an MLB game. And that was like a month later. So keep an eye out for that kind of fun stuff, Emily, because it may come your direction.
You might get an invite even cooler than being on the Bad Dog Agility podcast.
Maybe.
I don't think so.
We're honored that you're here like next day while your brain is still in a fog. So I like bringing up all these things because I want to encourage people who are listening. You've got a dog. You've been interested in Westminster. Yes, it's up there on the East Coast. And if you don't happen to be from that area, it's going to be a little bit of money, a little bit of work, a little bit of travel. And by a little, I mean potentially a lot. However, it is a very, very cool experience. I think it should be on every dog agility person's bucket list. And I want to especially reach out to people who don't know that the structure of the event is such that they value breed diversity in the finals. So if you have a truly outstanding, top of your breed kind of a dog in terms of speed or flash, and you've had people tell you things like that is the most amazing X, Y, and Z that I've ever seen, I think you are the kind of people we need to get over to Westminster, and it is possible for some of these dogs to make the final without going too clean. So I want you to keep that in mind as well. I will point out one thing that annoys me before we wrap up this podcast, and that is that Fox, in their public release, like I guess article or summary of it, which they said very nice things about you, Emily, mentioned that I think your time was faster than last year's time, which was faster than the year before that. And so clearly the competition was getting better each year as the winning time got faster and faster. Which demonstrates a gross misunderstanding of how dog agility works, and that seemed to be Fox's line. I'll ask you very quickly, even though we will not talk about it here. I will discuss it in the Wednesday wrap up in print. But did either of you? Let me start with Emily. Have you watched the broadcast? At least your run, or the entirety, or parts of it?
I watched it. Kind of like Sarah, right before this podcast. Because like mentioned, we really weren't able to see as spectators the event itself.
Right.
So I did want to catch up on it and see all the dogs run. So I did watch the whole presentation, and it was cool to see like Carrie DeYoung out there as one of the
of course
heights and dog stuff. So
okay, and Jen.
I have not watched any of it. I love the
honesty.
I didn't watch the broadcast. I don't plan to watch the broadcast. Maybe years down the road, when I have a few more moments to process everything that happened. But right now, we're just gonna look ahead to the next event. Gotcha.
And I will say that I also watched just part of it. I think maybe half or 2/3 of it before this podcast to prepare as well, because Saturday night, unfortunately, we had to go to a swim championship.
Well, that
like
wasn't
regional
unfortunate. It's just.
I mean, unfortunate from the perspective of I wanted to watch it live. It was the first live Westminster in forever.
That's true.
I could have seen Emily.
But we were watching our daughter live.
But I was watching my daughter live swimming at a regional championship here in Texas swim meet. She's a freshman, ninth grader in high school. And that meet started at like 5:30 and ran all the way to 10 p.m. So it was just not a thing that we could do to watch it live this year, which was a little bit disappointing. But I will talk more about that in the wrap up.
All right. And as we wrap up this podcast, I just wanted to take a minute and congratulate all the winners from this year's Masters Agility Championship at Westminster. The winner of the 8-inch division was Andrea Samuels with Papillon Gabby. The winner of the 12-inch division was Abby Beasley with Shelty Swindle. The winner of the 16-inch division, of course, was Emily Klarman with Border Collie Vanish here on the podcast today. The winner of the 20-inch division was Amber McCune with Border Collie Shelby Cobra. And the winner of the 24-inch division was Lori Barbie with Weimaraner Sterling. And our overall winner was Emily Klarman with Vanish. And the top All-American dog was Kayla Feeney with Gable. Congratulations to all of those winners.
Emily, where can people find you? I know that you are an instructor now. You mentioned that you are working with Justin Perry up in the Northeast. So where can people find you both in person, and then where can they find you online if they want to, interview you about the event and things like that?
Apparently not TikTok.
Media requests, not TikTok.
Yeah, so I work in Huntingdon Valley in Pennsylvania at UDOG with Jessica Jew and Perry DeWitt. So we've established a nice training facility there, and it's been fun to watch it grow and keep up with those two because they're certainly very talented ladies. So to be able to do what they do as well has been a super cool experience. So that's where we're at locally. Instagram's probably the best way to get a hold of me. My user count is roaming BCS, like Border Collies. And then Facebook, but I try to keep my Facebook slightly to a minimum.
All right.
Gotcha.
And we will put links to that on the show notes page
right.
for anybody.
Right. Hey, did Perry make you cheer for the Eagles in the Super Bowl?
Perry didn't make me do nothing. Go Birds.
Oh, no, it's horrible. I'm going to pretend you didn't say that. But,
absolutely.
All right. Well, thank you so much for coming on. I think that is a great kind of wrap up of the event. We will post a couple of videos and links to your profiles and course maps and things like that on the show notes page. And then, of course, all of our newsletter subscribers will get a little bit more of an inside scoop from Esteban on the Wednesday wrap up. And thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
And that's it for this week's podcast. We'd like to thank our sponsors, St. Rocco's Treats and hititboard.com. Check out the Teeter Teach It, only at hititboard.com. The Teeter Teach It is an easy-to-use tool that controls the amount of tip on your teeter so you can introduce motion to your dog in a gradual way. Go to hititboard.com for the new Teeter Teach It and other training tools and toys. Use discount code BDA10 to get 10% off your order. That's hititboard.com. Happy training.
Thank you for listening to Bad Dog Agility. We hope you enjoyed today's episode. For more information, updates, and links to all our socials, just check out our website, www.baddogagility.com. If you haven't already signed up for our email subscription, we would love to have you join the BDA community. Until next time, take care.